We're looking into the Enneagram 4 and also doing a deeper dive into the childhood experience, which helps to form all of our personalities. Let's go over the bullet points of the Enneagram 4, first of all. So sometimes the Enneagram 4 is called the romantic, and sometimes the individualist. Now, the individualist comes from the fact that they like to be unique and authentic. Sometimes they really like to stand out in a crowd. Sometimes they think they're just doomed to stand out in a crowd. But they embrace their authenticity. Sometimes they're called the romantic, and the reason for that isn't necessarily about like romantic love, but for their deep feeling and their tendency to find meaning and significance in mundane, everyday, ordinary things. Common characteristics of the 4 is a wide emotional range. They're sensitive, often creative. So you often see poets, artists, musicians, theater folk in the Enneagram 4. They're imaginative and generous, complex, intense, and empathetic. They battle shame and inadequacy. They enjoy their uniqueness, but then they sorrow over not fitting in. Sometimes when I tell people that I'm an Enneagram 4 to people who are just starting to know the Enneagram, they say, "Which one's that?" And I'm like, they're the ones who really want to be different, but then are sad when they don't fit in. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're temperamental. The 4s are prone to melancholy. And I found a definition or a clarification about melancholy that I wanted to share. It seemed important to discern. It's not depression. It's melancholy, and it can be bittersweet. So sometimes when studying the Enneagram 4, a distinction is made between melancholy and sadness. Here's an explanation that resonated with me. Sadness is an emotion, and we all feel it from time to time. But melancholy is more like a state of mind, and I experience it as just a weighty, heavy feeling when I'm finding significance, meaning, weight, in significant or insignificant things. They're in the heart or shame triad, and that means that they are feeling dominant. The stance of the Enneagram 4 is withdrawing, so that means we move away from people to process our thoughts and our feelings and our place in the world and our opinions. We're oriented to the past, and we're doing repressed. The deadly sin of the 4 is envy. Here's another clarification. Jealousy is when I fear that you will take something of mine. Envy is when I want something of yours that I lack. And 4s are capable of both. The fear of the 4 is of being inadequate, insignificant, and emotionally cut off. And the motivation is to be authentically known by themselves and by others, and to be significant. They might have the wing of the 3 or the 5. The direction and strengths is to the unhealthy characteristics of a 2, and insecurity to the positive characteristics of the 1. Some bullet points from the reading that I thought were significant was from page 160. Relationships are important to 4s. And they fear abandonment and can initiate a push-pull situation in their relationships with others. 4s need partners and friends who can detach without withdrawing. This was important. Listen without needing to agree. Don't get sucked in, but don't leave. This became really real to me at a certain point of my life when in dealing with a conflict with a 4, it can be uncomfortable. You just deal with that conflict and then you go away because it's uncomfortable to remain there. That's really painful for 4s. And I realized that the perfect way to handle it, I think, for me anyway, is to go ahead and deal with that conflict. Don't shy away from it because they're 4s and sensitive. Conflict's hard for a lot of numbers. Nobody really loves it except maybe the 8. But go ahead and deal with the conflict, but make sure you're letting them know that you're not leaving them. So deal with the conflict and then say, but you're so important to me. Can we schedule our next coffee date right now? Because I want to get back to us as soon as possible. That would be a really honoring way to handle conflict with a 4. 4s are loyal and present for others during the hard times. We should tell our troubles to a 4 because they can bear witness to the pain of others. But often folks decide that 4s are sad enough and we shouldn't burden them. I have a friend who's going through a crisis right now. And she recently texted me and said how much she appreciated my support during this time. She said, "You've been there more than others." And then she second-guessed herself. She said, "Maybe you haven't been there more than others, but your input has been more helpful." So knowing that I was preparing for this, I said, "Could you tell me what that means more or how you've experienced that?" Her first thought was consistency, that many people will know you're in a hard time and say some conciliatory thing and go away because it's awkward. But I know that what she's experiencing right now is loneliness, so most nights, more nights than not, I'll check in with her by text, and she's found comfort in that. She also thinks it's so dismissive when people say, "It'll be okay, it'll be okay." And I, a 4 maybe, would not tell her it'll be okay, because it's okay that it's not okay right now for a 4. We're ready to sit with you when it's not okay. I thought that described 4ness pretty well, or at least the part of 4ness that makes us good companions during the hard times. We'll look deeper into the Enneagram 4 when Lori interviews me and in the spiritual practices, but let's flesh out the childhood experience now. A lot of times people don't necessarily resonate with the childhood experience. It's a tool you can use to try to discern your type if you're having trouble pinpointing it. And oftentimes people say, "I don't know that speaks to me." You're not sure that the wound of the childhood message of the 1 is especially poignant for you, I think you've said in the past. We'll look at that a little bit later. But Enneagram wisdom teaches that part of what contributes to our developing personality were experiences in childhood that taught us something untrue or unhelpful about ourselves or the world. Remember that Enneagram wisdom also teaches that inborn qualities contribute to the way we experience our childhood. So someone who experienced a similar childhood won't necessarily respond to it in the same way that you do. We'll never know the true equation of nature versus nurture because we're only living our one life, and we can't know how changing one aspect of our past would change or affect our present or our future. Remember that each of us received messages in childhood that were not helpful. It doesn't mean that you're broken or messed up or unmendable in any way if you experienced a wounding message in childhood. It just means that you're human, and so were your caregivers. Now, I'm not talking about or minimizing real capital T trauma right now. I'm talking about everyday trauma that we all experience in our lives. Identifying that wounding message is the first step from healing from it. So if it's hard for you to reflect in this way, I hope you'll give yourself permission to do so. I want to be clear, there are typical wounding messages that we all received, likely accidentally, and there is capital T trauma. Enneagram is a great path to self-discovery for personal and spiritual growth, regardless of the state of your family of origin or the state of your marriage, or if you've experienced trauma, or if you're in the throes of addiction, or if you're in recovery. But to truly heal from some big hurts that I've mentioned, some will benefit from the help of a counselor. It's not weak to seek the appropriate help. It's smart and mature. So if your loved one had a broken leg, you wouldn't say, "Suck it up, muscle through." You would seek the appropriate treatment for them. Likewise, if you have a broken heart or a broken spirit, find a good counselor and get the healing that you need. Lori and I have both benefited from good counseling at different stages of our lives, and we are downright evangelical about it. I really earnestly want this group and this church to be one that normalizes health and growth, inner health and growth, whatever it takes. Each wounding message has a corresponding healing message. And that's what we need to aim for, strive for, with the people that we love and with ourselves as we identify the wounding message. And I have some slides to scroll through that talk about healing and wounding messages. And let's just go ahead and scroll through them. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yep, I don't have much to say, just several seconds on each of them. And for those of you, whether you're in person or watching from home, if you ever want access to our slides to reflect on later, you can email us and they're easily sent out. As we look deeper into the childhood message, I'm going to share about identifying a message that made an impact in my own childhood. And I don't expect my story to be meaningful to you because it will mirror any of yours exactly. I hope it will be helpful in that I'm modeling reflecting on the past with the goal of discovery and growth, and I hope it will be clear that it's not about parent blaming. I received an abundance of positive, helpful messages in my growing up years. In many ways and at many times, my childhood felt idyllic. I had a dad who brought fun and charm to many social situations and who worked hard for his family. I had a mom who spoke the same love language as me, lots of smooches and I love yous, not just when we parted ways or said goodbye, but even if we just crossed paths in the kitchen. I had older siblings who are good people and who granted me a mix of meaningful time with them and time on my own space. But we all, every one of us, also received messages that were not what we needed at that time. As we've discussed before, it might have come as a wounding event. That's the nurture part. No, nurture, sorry. And it might have just been something we simply arrived on earth hardwired to believe. That's the nature part. In my family, there were events that took place before I was even born that led to some negative feelings in the grown people in my life. I'm guessing that these feelings ran the gamut from shame, regret, and disappointment to resentment, sadness, and anger. I observed the effects of these feelings, but these events were never talked about. What I know of these events, I learned by accident or from indirect conversations with third parties that affected how I felt about myself and the family that I loved and identified with. Now, I don't want you to imagine something too scandalous. There was no crime, no abuse, no neglect. The disappointment that was experienced by one of my parents was a failed marriage before my two parents ever met. It wouldn't be an unusual turn of events today, but in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when these things were playing out, it was unusual. It was almost unheard of. And we were in the church-going community in New Paris, Indiana. It just wasn't common. I didn't know another soul whose family was affected by divorce until late in my elementary school years. And because of that unwanted novelty, the feeling around it was probably shame, and the strategy for dealing with it was discretion to the point of secrecy. I still think of my childhood with my smart, funny, kind family as mostly happy, but this detail, again, before I was even born, served as a filter over the lens of my childhood. It meant there were relationships in my family that didn't look like relationships in other people's families that I knew, explanations that would not be offered, lowered voices, having conversations that would not include me, and the implication that I should not ask to be filled in. Flash forward to 4 or 5 years ago when I was introduced to the Enneagram. You all know that I spent some time thinking that I was probably an 8. When my Enneagram informed friend was helping me process that. She's like, "You sure you're not an 8? That's not resonating with you?" She suggested I look at the childhood message of the 4 and the 8 and see which one sounded more like me. When I looked at the possible childhood message of the 4, that I was deficient, less than, didn't fit in, the blurred lines for me went away and things cleared up. Now, I don't think my siblings experienced that childhood in the same way that I did. There are a variety of reasons for this, but I think the nature part has to be considered. I think I probably arrived on Earth ready to be a sensitive child. Let's see. And intuitive about feelings, ready to absorb them. And don't romanticize this because it's plenty annoying to people around me and to me, myself. It's easy to imagine me picking up on the feelings of my deeply adored family members and absorbing them as a young child when another sibling might not have been aware of them or interested in them. Or they may simply have had another way of dealing with them. So that is my story of reflecting on the past for the purpose of self-discovery and growth, but I think there's another thing to add as it pertains to 4s. We will learn tonight, we are learning, of the many qualities of the 4, good and bad, and one of them is a tendency to be self-absorbed. So it's not lost on me that in the story of my childhood experience, I'm not even the most wounded person in the story. I'm a peripheral character at best. I don't know if that means I'm being self-absorbed when I tell the story from my perspective with any significance, or if it's just the sensitivity of the 4 that's clear here. That I'm willing to examine feelings, past events, and their effects on us, and to talk about it when others aren't. It's possible that I'm being self-absorbed, and it's possible I could be misunderstood as self-absorbed by people who experience the world differently and aren't as feelings-focused. So that is an example of looking at your childhood experience to see the effect it might have had on your developing personality. We're going to move to the interview portion. And Lori came up with some questions which she sent me to reflect upon over the week.
So just a little introduction. I told you that I was introduced to the Enneagram when my family had a book club over Christmas. And I think I had read it. It was before we went down there. So I had read the book in preparation, and we were at our Sunday school Christmas party, and I just mentioned the word Enneagram to somebody, and someone's ears perked up behind me and said, "Enneagram? I would love to talk to you about the Enneagram." And that person was Deanna Beth. And I would expect nothing less. Over the years that I have known her, she has been willing to dive deep in many, many subjects with me. I really appreciate that she thinks a lot, and she processes a lot, and she's always willing to talk about the hard stuff, and she's always very perceptive. I just was meeting her for coffee yesterday and brought up something that I had been thinking about, and just right away was offered some very perceptive ideas for what I was thinking about. So her 4ness has shown itself to me many times, and I think you'll really appreciate what she has to say tonight. So let's dive in. Deanna, thank you for being willing to share. First of all, you just mentioned this briefly. In your history with the Enneagram, you for a long time thought you were an 8. Could you talk to us a little more about the process of moving from deciding you were an 8 to finding yourself in the 4?
I started learning about the Enneagram through podcasts and not through reading at the time. There were 2 podcasts that I went to. Both of the authors have their own separate podcasts. Probably around the time the book was released, they did one together for a while. And all of those podcasts have descriptions for each episode, and I trusted my friend who said, "I think you're an 8, so I only looked at the 8 episodes, and there was enough there to keep me busy for a long time. And there was enough about the 8, about myself, that sounded like an 8. Some of those things would be, I'm intense, and I have a strong personality, and I take up a lot of space in the room. I don't think that's true of every 4. Like your 4 son is different than me. But that is a way that I show up in the world. I do have strong opinions. There's something about leadership that we know about 8s. It's not said about 4s necessarily, but I can be a leader. I can be a presence that people listen to. But I've also had an experience similar, like dovetailing with that wasn't good. It wasn't comfortable for me. I've been in groups where I think I'm just like mildly suggesting an idea, and then we're doing that, and I'm in charge, and then I find out later nobody really wanted to do that. And nobody likes that. I don't know how that happens, but I have had some of those experiences. And I would also, there was something else. In my younger adult years, I have gotten some feedback from people about how they experience my anger, and that sounded like 8. I think I'll talk more about that later on. But those were the things that made me think, I guess I'm an 8. The things that didn't resonate were things about energy and workaholism. I have a lot of energy to put behind work that is inspiring to me or has a creative aspect to it. I'll work tirelessly on those things, but it's not everyday work. I'll work long and hard and late into the night or in the early morning even on organizing my music library, or at one time scrapbooking, or painting a room. The kind of once in a blue moon work that you do. But the daily work, definitely not. And the other thing about 8 that didn't resonate with me was the relationship with conflict. Never feels comfortable for me. I won't back down from a conflict if it's something that's important to me. And as a 4, a lot of things are important to me, but I don't like a tussle. It ruins my day or my week or my life, depending on how it goes. So that never felt good. So the childhood experience started clarifying things for me when Tanya had me look at that, and then finally learning about stances and triads, done deal. Once I learned about shame, and like you said, I didn't know I was angry, but now that I know I'm angry, I see it everywhere. Yeah. Same with shame. I did not think I was walking around in shame, but now that I know, I see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really instructive, like as you're thinking, if you're trying to choose between 2, some of the things, like you talk about conflict. If I had to guess, I would have thought Deanna Beth does not shy away from conflict. She's told me several times, I had to say something about this. It was too important not to. So looking at that on the face value, I would have thought that's an 8. But not knowing your inner struggle with then feeling terrible about the conflict, yeah. I think that's why we don't type other people, but also is instructive in choosing between 2. So let's talk a little more about shame and the feeling triad. Can you help us understand a little more the concept of shame and how you experience that?
Okay. I knew that what I wanted to clarify about when I said I'm going to come back to that, it had to do with that conflict. No, my anger.
Your anger.
And I've already forgotten it, so don't let me forget it again. Shame, it really spoke loudly to me once I learned Brené Brown's definition of shame, which is that it's different from guilt, in which I did something wrong and I feel bad. With shame, it's just I'm the wrong thing. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, but somehow I'm not right. That feels right. And 2s, 3s, and 4s are all in the shame triads, but 4s are known for feeling deficient. So I think it might be news to 2s and 3s that they're performing in order to earn love and acceptance. But 4s might be more ready to, I see that in myself, perhaps. So what I wanted to clarify, what I wanted to come back to, when I talked about feedback I had gotten from others about how they experienced my anger, I think there's a piece of shame there. Well, one thing I would say is that I don't get that feedback every day or even every year. A few people have given me feedback about how they received my anger, but because I'm sensitive, it might as well have been 100 people. So I think I weighted it too heavily, and it helped me to think I was an 8. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think is that when I think of when I get prickly or explosive, and it will look like anger, I realize now it's defensiveness, and it has its roots in shame. So if I feel like I'm being singled out or not approved of or included or welcome, criticized in any way, my shame looks like, oh yeah, well look at you, look at all these people around us. Well, I had my reasons. That's defensiveness, and it's because I feel like I'm ready to not belong, like I am all loaded and ready to be unwelcome, I guess. That's how my shame feels to me, often.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the anger triad, we talk about how that anger can be used for good, in justice, or in standing up for other people, directing it in positive ways. How do we look at shame in positive ways?
Yeah, part of your question was, is it ever useful? I didn't come up with anything that's useful. I think, if anything, it makes me hyper-aware of social dynamics, who's in charge, who's included, who's in, who's out. And the hyper-awareness has burdened me as much as it served me. I don't know if I can say it's helpful.
Do you think it makes you extra sensitive to others who may be feeling shame?
You know, by the way, do you think your anger is helpful?
I think that it can, if I am angry for somebody else, it can spur me towards working towards justice.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a helpful emotion in most relationships, but I feel like it can be used positively.
So, my shame maybe, or it maybe makes me recognize it in others, and I can talk through with other people if they feel like they're really opening up to me or sharing with me and looking for a little counsel or sympathy. I can sort of dissect the situation. Oh, I think you're obviously sensitive, and I can tell why you might be sensitive for this little lost soul that's in your family that you love, and I think you're feeling prickly about that, so I can sort of dissect it and disengage from the shame to what's behind it, maybe, for them, better than I can for myself.
I think you're especially good at that. So 4s are also described as doing repressed. You are obviously someone who gets things done. You have your own business. You've helped in your children's schools. You just do a lot of things. How do you experience this doing repression?
I would say that was a way that I recognized myself easily, learning about the repressed centers. Yes, I thought, I am lazy. Now I wouldn't describe myself that way. Now that I understand it better, I would say instead that my inner world is so compelling, meaning my thoughts and feelings, that it is hard for me to put that aside and do some mundane work. And mundane is key, because as I said, I'll work tirelessly about something creative or something that makes my life better, but not cleaning up the kitchen every day. So that is one way that I experience doing repression, I guess.
Do you do the things that you like? You do the things you dislike first or last?
Last or never.
Okay. So one thing that's very important to 4s that you really value is authenticity. You want to be known. I just have to tell this story because it always makes me laugh in my head. So 3 years ago, pre-COVID, we had a New Year's Eve party. And somebody in our Sunday school class asked, well, what are your resolutions for this year? And we just went around and said one thing. Deanna Beth acted like we had wounded her because she just didn't want to give a flippant answer. She wanted to give something authentic and real. But it was very insulting that she had to to give that, I think, because she didn't want to say it in the same way that the rest of us had. She wanted to give a real answer.
I was going to tell that story too, and here's how I would say. First of all, there's doing repression in a New Year's Eve, like my feelings about a New Year's Eve resolution too, because I don't want to do the thing that makes things harder than they already are. That's what a New Year's resolution is.
That
makes
sense.
things harder. It's hard to do because if it was easy, you're already doing it. And I also, like Lori I was whining about, oh my gosh, I don't want to say. And Lori was just like, say anything. Say you want to binge a show on Netflix.
Yeah.
And if I was smarter, I would have said, yes, I want to watch my resolution is to watch the next episode of Ted Lasso, which I was going to do anyway. But when she was telling me later that she was observing my foreness in this, she was like whining, no, it has to be real. I don't think I actually whined those words, but I didn't want to say something fake. And yeah, it was about like this is saying something about me. It has to be a real thing. So that was something about authenticity. I would also say, I was thinking this through in the parking lot before, authenticity and wanting to be known. This is the woebegone tale of the four. Like, we really want to be accepted and we really want to be along, but not at the cost of falsely blending in, like pretending to be like you. So in my old age, I have come to the point where I will kind of saying out loud to myself, I'm going to be real about what I think on this subject, even if it's unpopular, because then when you reject me, at least I have my authenticity. At least I've been true to myself. And I've had experiences where I have bent over backwards and accommodated, tried to be passive and pleasing, and how do you want to do it? And they've rejected me anyway, and nothing has left a more sour taste in my mouth. Yeah. And I think there's something in that question about negative feedback with authenticity. So the risk then is when you are really being yourself and then you're rejected, what they're rejecting is really you, and that hurts.
So, negative feedback or constructive criticism, how is it best offered to you?
So if it has to do with conflict, like something relational with us, I think what I said before, I mean, it's harder to put into practice because when you're dealing with something difficult, I get it. You just want to put it down and get away from it. But it would have been meaningful to me at times if we dealt with the conflict and before we said goodbye, you set up when we would get back to being us. Yeah, that would have been good. But negative feedback in a more professional setting or something like that, I do find that time to reflect is good. We've talked about this once before. We talked about it on our 8 night, dealing with conflict. Our 8 wanted to say, let's right now sit down and work through it. And her 5 husbands needs time to process. And I brought up that when we then do our conflict resolution and we do our discussion, you're giving me new information that I'm going to need to process. So I think, I don't know that I've experienced this a lot, but I can imagine it being good to revisit, have a follow-up. Let's do that. And I would love it if you would initiate. Because I'm thinking about it all the time, and it usually means I initiate. I've got some thoughts on this. Yeah.
I think that's very valuable for someone in a relationship with a 4 to know that. Yes. And probably a 1 too.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about this, about 4s in relationship kind of experiencing that push-pull dynamic, pushing into a relationship, then maybe getting nervous or overwhelmed and pulling back and pushing back in if they fear they're missing something. Do you experience this? How do you deal with it if you do?
This is the question that I was least likely to say absolutely to. I'm reaching a little bit for it. Here's what I can see in myself, that the people I long for the most are the ones who are least accessible. If someone is true, good. Now I can move on to like enticing somebody else who isn't, you know. That seems like push-pull maybe?
Interesting, okay. So melancholy. Fours don't mind melancholy. Do you feel like happiness is a luxury? Or uninteresting?
Okay, no, we're going to hear from Colin later. And last year, and Colin is Chris and Lori's son, likely. And in his interview, we did this, he does a little mini monologue, I guess. And we played this for our class last year, and friends of ours were attending that, and they came up to me afterwards and said, "No, Colin, I really enjoyed it, but he said something that I hope isn't true for you. I think he says something like, 'I'm never really happy.'" And they were like, "Please, Deanna, tell us that isn't true for you." And I would say, it is not true for me. I would say, I don't expect to be happy. I think I'll have moments of happiness and seasons of happiness, but I don't think the lack of, or the presence of sorrow is a problem to solve. I think it's a part of life, and I'm ready for it. So I'm not expecting happiness. However, you know, here's what you do see in teaching. In teaching, you hear big emotions, but then when they do their deep dive, it's always the negative emotions that they focus on. But I think all of my emotions have little exclamation points after them, including my joy. If I'm in a room of joy, I'm the most joyful person in the room. And if I'm in a room of sorrow, I'm right there with an exclamation point. Anger? Yeah, any of it. I think I feel intense emotions.
So let's talk a little bit about the 4 in crisis and fear. You're currently going through what could possibly feel like a scary time, health-wise. How do you handle more than a generalized melancholy, but real fear and sadness?
So like in the day-to-day, I find myself feeling clingy about my kids. Like especially the kids, here's some of this push-pull, a little bit of that fact, especially the kids who are distant from me. Because we have one that lives at home, she's local, and I treasure my time with any of my family members, but like Ava comes home for her spring break on Friday, and Brooks has promised to come home at least one of those weekends, and I just like, I'm longing for it, and I can't wait, and I will breathe easy when we're all together. And I think a lot of mothers are that way, a lot of parents are that way. It feels, so Ava heard of my diagnosis was happening right as Ava was going away to school. So my health crisis in my mind is also in the season of Ava leaving. So there might be something of that. The worst days of my health crisis were post-diagnosis, but pre-planned. Like I knew I had cancer, but I didn't know to what extent. I didn't know what the plan was, the treatment, the prognosis. Those were dark days. And for a moment, it plugged me in and like did away with my doing repression, because I was like, my legacy is I need people to remember me well. There's things I need to do. And then we had a plan and the prognosis was fine. And then I fell into deep contemplation and became one with the couch and Netflix, which was appropriate, also, for recovery. But scary times, yeah, I am tremendously contemplative during these times. I'm prone to it anyway. And when things are heavy, and also my calendar is emptied out. I was in a health crisis, which made me immunocompromised during a pandemic. My bubble got really small. And my days got really empty for a season. And it does mean, I I almost don't want to say this out loud because I don't want people to say, you need to get busy and put things out of your mind. But having a lot of free time meant that I had a lot of time to spend with my thoughts. And I don't think it was negative. I just don't. And I have noticed, it also, because we're doing this Enneagram class, I'm thinking a lot about how I might see the stress of my type, and am I going to my stress number? And I told Lori, I think I'm even managing to pick up the negative qualities of my security number, because a negative quality of the 1, my security number, is to be critical of others. And I've spent a lot of time feeling critical of others during this season, but it's almost 100% I'm feeling critical about relational aspects, and that's 4, and that's 2, my stress number. Gosh, I thought there was one more thing I wanted to say about the health crisis and being in fear, but it's gone. Okay.
If you think of it, you can say it. What do you wish others knew about being a 4?
I wish others valued more people valued what 4s have to offer. I might have said in this class already that Suzanne Stabile says, when I start teaching about repressed centers of intelligence, you all stop taking notes and you cross your arms and you make mean faces at me. Because when a person hears doing repressed, it's hard not to think lazy. You're calling me lazy? If a person hears thinking repressed, it's hard not to believe they're being called stupid. And that's not what that means, by the way. But I would say the caveat to that statement by Suzanne is that the people who are feeling repressed don't care that they're feeling repressed. I don't think they're offended at all. And I do think that in our culture, everybody's delighted about those who think the big thoughts. Everybody's glad for the folks who do big things and proud of the big things that are being done. But I don't think there's a lot of value placed on emotional intelligence, which is what we have to offer. And I think it's not indulgent to examine your feelings, come face to face with them, deal with them appropriately. I think it's healthy. I think it's really necessary to be whole and integrated and healthy. And I just don't think it's highly valued in our culture.
Mm-hmm. What's your superpower?
Emotional intelligence. I'm reading, so Brene Brown has a new book called Atlas of the Heart, and I am just beginning it. And I was reading it, absorbing it through Audible at first, and she said, but even if you're listening to it on Audible, I really want you to go and get the book, because there's illustrations that are so helpful in it. And I was trying to find this illustration because it is one that I would have used for the 4. And one illustration, the first illustration, is of a guy looking up at the stars. Okay. And the second illustration is filled with the stars, and the tiny guy is looking up at it, surrounded by the stars. I could have used that illustration to describe the 4 too, because we're so finding the significance, finding the awe. When Lori and I were talking about this book, Atlas of the Heart, I said that something she said early on is that most people only register the emotions of happy, sad, mad. And Lori said, what else is there? And I said, oh, well, it's been fascinating. I mean, we're talking about in the book, we're talking about the difference between interest and curiosity. Interest is removed and impersonal. I'm interested in this. Curiosity has a passion behind it, has an emotion behind it. I want to be connected. I want to get all into it. There's a difference between wonder and awe. Wonder is, sort of a curiosity about something. I'd like to learn more about it. And awe is, I want to celebrate it. I want to put it on a pedestal and observe and delight in it. That's the 4. It's more than happy, sad, mad.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your authenticity and your willingness to be known and share tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Let's talk a little more about being in a relationship with the 4. So 4s are great friends. They appreciate beauty, art, culture. They can introduce you to ways of seeing the world that you may not see until you look at it through their eyes. They're often creative. They often play music, make art, dance, or different ways to express that creativity. They want to be unique, so they often have unique points of view that can challenge or stretch us. Also, 4s feel. Someone said that 4s are probably the ones that made up those feeling word charts that we've all seen. This can be good because they're willing to sit with us during hard feelings in ways that make other numbers uncomfortable. They don't necessarily have the need to move through those hard feelings quickly just to get on to more pleasant things. That can be therapeutic and healing in a relationship. But sometimes their feelings can be big and overwhelming to those of us on the outside. It can look too big or too dramatic, as if the response is bigger than the situation warrants. In addition, they may also appear to want to isolate themselves or pull away from us. So what can we do in relationships with a 4? First of all, it's helpful to know that 4s may fear abandonment. So they might find themselves pushing away the people they love the most. It can be a way of saying, will you come towards me, or will you abandon me too? So meet them with affection and let them know that you're there. Work to find a way to balance between withdrawing and getting overwhelmed. 4s need friends and partners who can listen and affirm without getting sucked into their emotions. Be okay with melancholy. Don't feel like you need to help them rise to the level of cheerfulness. Secondly, 4s can feel bullied if they are judged as being overly sensitive. Know that 4s press into pain and angst as a way of searching for the truth and uncovering fallacies. Their ability to read and describe emotions is one of their unique contributions to the world. Be authentic with them and work to let them know that you want to understand their true self as well. Does this keep moving down? 4s are often strongly driven by their values and passions. Support those passions in practical ways. If they love music, listen to their music. If they love movies, watch their movies with them. My husband, Chris, has been such a great example to me in this. My son, Colin, we think he's a 4, very interested in music and movies. And so one way Chris connected with him when he was in high school and more likely to pull away from us is they watched through the American Film Institute's 100 top movies together. And just sat and watched movies. Chris did not make Colin critique them or even make him say anything about them. It's just something that they did together. And acknowledging Colin's love of movies. Make space for beauty in your life with a 4. Learn from them what they appreciate and find beauty in that. Help them find beauty in the mundane, the everyday routine of life that needs doing. And lastly, recognize their uniqueness. Tell them specifically why you appreciate their point of view. Give them gifts that reflect who they are and what they're passionate about. This will help them feel like they are truly seen and understood. So one of the things about learning the Enneagram, maybe especially as a 1, I don't know if other numbers experience this without the inner critic, but as you understand more what your children are, you understand the ways that you've failed them. And so having a son that we think is a 4, I just see so many times where I told him, this situation does not warrant this type of response, and telling him that he was too much or that his feelings were not valid. And I'm hoping that as I know more, I do better. But it's been very instructive to know how the 4 works in dealing with Colin. And he was willing to share a little bit about his experience as a 4. I just want to play that for you.
Hi, my name is Colin Judson. I'm 20 years old. I'm a student at Ball State University, and I am an Enneagram Type 4. I think. I mean, that's what my mom tells me I am, so. Anyway, I've been asked to answer some of these questions about Enneagram Type 4s. So, the first question is, what does it mean to you to be known? What makes you feel understood? Well, being a 4, my initial answer to this question is nothing. But I guess I'll give a little more than that. So throughout my life, it's been kind of hard for me to connect with and understand people. Part of it is because of social anxiety. Another part of it is, I think it's just that. But anyway, when I get to know someone well enough, where I can like we have shared interests, similar tastes, we understand each other's points of view, eventually, I'll have less anxiety when trying to talk to them, and I guess, in that case, I guess I would feel understood. It's a bit rare for that to happen, but I guess it's happened. 1 second. My computer turned off. Anyway, second question. Do you feel like happiness is a luxury? I don't know if I would consider it like a luxury, because, in some cases, I think you would need happiness to get through life. But I've gotten to a point in my life where happiness isn't really something I expect, and if you try to work towards it, you're not really going to get it. And as sad as it sounds, I've kind of accepted that I'm not really going to be happy a lot. But I guess no, but I don't really expect it. Voice cracked a little bit, sorry. And the last question is, what do you wish others knew about being a 4? Well, I don't know if this is like a common thing in 4s, because I don't know a lot about the Enneagram. I'll just say that right now. My parents are kind of obsessed with it, and I'm just kind of there. But I think, I don't know if this is a common thing, but I found that I can be pretty cynical and pessimistic. I don't know if that's a common thing. Anyway, that's all the time I have. Thank you for having me. That's it. Bye. Hi.
Okay. So things that I wish I had known when he was younger that I know now. Hopefully help us get closer together. If you are a 4, if you think you are a 4, some areas for growth, possible growth for the 4. Some people have feelings. 4s can be their feelings. Remember that you aren't your feelings. You're a person who has feelings. And know that sometimes you can use melancholy or surface pain to mask real or deeper pain. Practice asking yourself, what's really going on here? And recognize that your deadly sin of envy is your heart yearning for something that seems more real or significant than what you have. It can lead to idealizing things that others have, a perfect marriage, an ideal job. But fours can also be a victim of their own idealizing when they finally have what seems to be that perfect partner or job, and then they realize it's not as good as I thought, so maybe it's not right. Fours need to own the beauty of what is significant and fabulous about them. Fours need to accept themselves with compassion. That allows you to offer a place of acceptance to others. Learn to practice contentment. Work to lay down that longing fueled by idealizing and be satisfied with your life. Find gratitude for the balance, the joy and the sorrow, the beauty and the pain. All of those can fuel your creativity. This balance can allow you to see what is and not be controlled by extremes. Find beauty and ritual in the mundane, in the everyday. So appreciate your morning cup of coffee, for the beauty of the cup, for the steam rising from the surface, how it feels to hold it in your hands, the calm and quiet you can enjoy in it. Work to find the same joy in everyday tasks, feeding the dog, washing the dishes, etc. Recognize that you are doing repressed and set small, realistic goals to accomplish. Know that a 1 in your life can help you do this if you need it. Oops, going the wrong way. And then some spiritual practices that the 4 might engage in. Again, going from what feels most comfortable to the 4 to the most stretching. 4s can often appreciate a practice of solitude. They need to be careful not to use solitude as a way to escape, but to take a break from the compulsion to be seen and known, from the frustration that nothing will ever quite meet their expectations. Resting in solitude allows 4s to practice entering a space that lets them see what is true and beautiful in themselves, to see themselves as God sees them. Journaling. Oh, missed one, sorry. No, I think I have them confused on here. Journaling is actually supposed to be next. Journaling offers the 4 the ability to explore their imagination and process what they're feeling. They need to be careful not just to journal about negative emotions and feelings, but to work to find a balance. Next would be to find a fellowship or a missional community to serve in. 4s are often prone toward introversion and even isolation. It's important for 4s to be with others, to be drawn out. So scheduling regular times with friends or to be part of a missional community like a church or Bible study or service opportunity helps the 4s to remember that they are loved for who they are in community. And then lastly, practice gratitude. We keep talking about how 4s tend toward melancholy. And it's okay to be okay with melancholy. But it's also okay to recognize that there are feelings of anger or frustration and dissatisfaction that arise. And remember that there can be more. A spiritual practice of gratitude helps the 4s to see the good things and the beauty in their lives. So 4s, remember, you express the beauty, creativity, and emotional honesty of God. You teach us that emotions are okay and are willing to sit with us in the experience of those emotions. Remember, 4s, you are seen, you are beautiful, and you are enough. Okay. And we have a few minutes for questions, if anybody has any. And we have a mic. Danabeth, it's commonly accepted that 4s are probably the rarest number on the Enneagram. Is that true?
Yeah, I have read in places that 4s are, there are fewer 4s on the globe than any other number, and that 6s are the most common. There are other teachers with other philosophies that think they're pretty well evenly divided between the 9 numbers, but that's.
I don't want to go off, but would you say there are 4s who, with the 3 wing, who maybe are more extroverted and enjoy people and maybe not as melancholy? Or perhaps maybe they're not a 4?
Oh.
Maybe repeat the question.
Yes, I should repeat the question. Jen's asking if a 4 has a 3 wing, does that make them more extroverted and less melancholy? I don't want to definitively answer that.
Could, I mean, and maybe maybe it's not a 4.
Well, I definitely,
Or not a 4, yeah, that, you did ask that.
and I definitely don't think that 4s have to be introverted. I don't know, do you feel like you're introverted?
Do you think I'm introverted? Do you, Jen, think I'm introverted?
I know you like time alone,
Yeah.
so maybe you recharge
I always
that way.
describe myself as an introvert who likes people.
Yeah.
I'm delighted
Yeah.
to be with people, but am I energized by it? Absolutely not. I gotta go take to my bed after this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Yeah.
But I also don't think I'm a 3 wing. I think I'm a 5 wing. Or I'm identifying with the 5 wing more these days. Yeah.
But I do think that a 4 with a 3 wing could look different, like, because maybe there's more of a push to perform, to look good. They still want to be authentic, but they maybe have that tinge of performer.
I think there's something there in your question about, or maybe there's something in what I think might be the answer to the question that's about connecting with people, the desire to connect with people. So maybe a 4 like Colin, I'm just putting words in his mouth, maybe he wants to connect with 2 people on earth. And I want to connect with everybody, and it hurts Michael, right? Like, if somebody doesn't want to connect with me, of the 100 people who do, the one person that doesn't is the one I'll remember and talk to you about every day.
She wants to be the mayor of everyone.
The mayor of no place.
The mayor.
I'm running for mayor of no place. I want everybody's approval, everybody's vote. And maybe Colin's not, I don't get the sense Colin's looking for that.
Yeah, maybe not. I think he would rather be deeply known by fewer people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something there.
One thing that Colin has said to me, maybe you said it, and then I said it to Colin, and he said yes, that sometimes criticism or confrontation can feel like I hate you.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And one of the reasons that it would be so useful for when dealing with a conflict with a 4, that you make it known in whatever way you think would be useful. Make it known that you're not going away from them. Because if you then go away out of awkwardness, I don't think I could be the one to approach you, because I feel like they have rejected me and the relationship's probably over. That's kind of how I feel. And if you stay out of awkwardness, it confirms what I think.
I think that's really helpful to know.
One question is not about 4s, but
Yes, Becky.
can you be a number and then pick up on the repressed center of a wing also? Still trying to sort out what.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Becky's asking if you can pick up a repressed center of a wing, and I do think that's possible. Like, we're going to pick up the qualities. It might not be the repressed center, but it's the manifestation of how, like, the behavior of what that repressed center looks like. Your repressed center is yours. You get to have that forever. But it might just be the way people would describe it. Enneagram teachers probably would describe it as just, it's the behaviors. So do you think you're a 9, right? So doing repressed. And are you asking for yourself? Is there a
Actually, right now.
Gold star?
Anyway, but I also feel like I'm thinking repressed.
Oh.
So that's why I'm like,
Oh, You know, that's interesting. And I don't know if it's the thinking about the doing, but when I hear about when I hear the teaching that Suzanne has said, Suzanne's a 2, she's married to a 9, and she would describe her 9 husband, I've said before in class, that if he goes to work, so 9s are supposed to be like both doing dominant and doing repressed. It's a weird thing. Don't ask me to be an expert on it. But if he goes to work and his secretary has a to-do list for him, he would be unable to prioritize. He's just like, I don't know what to do first. That almost seems like a thinking thing, a processing thing, right? So he's just like doing whatever's at the top of the list and working his way down, or he might pick randomly. He's sort of unable to put together what should be done before the other thing. And that almost seems like a thinking repressed.
Yeah, I think I observed that in the 9 that I live with, in that he's doing repressed, but he also does not think this is mine to do. Even if it is his to do, he needs to be reminded sometimes, this is mine to do. And that seems like a process, a thinking, processing type
It does,
thing,
doesn't
too.
it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say mine necessarily like processing, but more like, you ask me to like tell you what I'm thinking about. I feel like introspection and thinking about, I don't want to spend time in here.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I wonder if part of that is that the 9 has trouble feeling like their opinion is important. And so they have to really practice thinking, what do I want? What is my opinion? What is my choice? What is my feeling? I think they have to practice thinking those things.
And 9s like to like they like other people to offer their opinion or their idea first so that they can merge with it. Is that something that you experience? You'd like to agree? Oh, here he comes.
I hope this is working. It is.
Oh.
Is it? Okay.
It sounds
So my wife is a 4,
Yeah.
and if I'm asking this question for myself, but also it might help somebody else. So if 100 people came up to her and told her that they loved her, and one other person told her that maybe they didn't, she would dwell for weeks on the one person that, maybe not weeks, but she would dwell on that one person that told her that they didn't care for her as much as the others. Being a 1 and having inner anger and all that, and I embrace that, and also being a perfectionist and wanting to help, if I would encourage her to think of the other 100 that were liking her instead of dwelling on the one that was, would she feel that as patronizing? What would be the best way to approach that with her?
Do you have some teaching for him?
Well, I don't know that I can tell you the best way to approach it. I can tell you that probably is not helpful.
Not helpful.
Not helpful to encourage her to
think about the
consider the
people.
100 and not the 1.
So
Knowing that there's one person out there in 100 that will hate everyone. No questions
that's
asked.
a good question, Michael. I don't know what the right response is to that. Like, you have to let me get through. You have to
I
let
was
me
Talking
get
about my
through
wife.
that one.
I was
You're talking
my
about your wife.
Yes.
Oh, your wife.
I'm trying not to make this personal.
But maybe that's
My
true.
generic wife,
He
yes.
needs to not fix it. He needs to sit with
Yeah.
your feelings of being sad that that person doesn't like.
I'm not saying not to fix it.
And I'm not
But just-
saying that
no,
you
no, no,
are.
No, understood. I'm just saying to encourage her, that probably is not going to do any good, or would she feel that that is
Here's what would be great.
patronizing, I guess?
Here's what would be great. Don't bring it up at that moment. Like, later on, say, I ran into Marilyn at
And
the
she
store.
likes you now?
Oh.
She told
What
me
have
that
you
she
heard?
likes you.
I ran into Marilyn at the store, and she was saying, like, it just warmed my heart that she was, like, describing you in this way or like asking about you fondly. That would warm my heart, but don't bring her up when we're talking about Rhonda. Yeah.
Rhonda's the person that
me?
doesn't like that
The
person.
person who
Okay,
doesn't like,
okay.
like this fictional person who
No,
doesn't
no,
like me.
no offense to all Rhondas out there. Okay, we're good.
Okay, you're dismissed.
Yeah, I think time is probably important too. I think that's a good question.
I think that was really good that you asked that, because I was thinking that too for my husband. I think I am a 4. And I told someone when they said, you know, what do you think you are? And I'm like, I think I'm a 4, but I have characteristics of a 1 and I have things of a 2. I'm confused. And then with this, I'm like, no, I am definitely a 4 because I'm very emotion. And like, if I'm working somewhere, I'm in tune with people's emotions and how they're feeling. That's why I was in human resources,
Yeah.
I guess, because I'm more in tune with that. But it is true, when there's 100 people, 99 say they like me and 1 doesn't, I'm like, well, why doesn't that 1 like me? What did I do? Was it, and then you get infatuated in that.
Mhm.
And yeah, my husband doesn't understand why, you know, it's like, well, all these other people, what's the matter? And then what you suggested, I think is great, you know, say, well, in that moment, just let me think what I have to think. And then
Yes.
later say, oh, this happened and this person said, and I'm like, oh, that's it, and it makes me forget about that.
Yeah.
You know, like to validate that there are other people, you know, I really like that you said that.
Yeah.
Because I can relate, but I really relate to what she said too about being outgoing. Because I was really introverted until I went to college. Then it was like a do-over for me, and I was extroverted. But I didn't realize how much, what is it, repressed? What is it?
Oh, the repress center? Like
The
doing repressed?
Doing repressed. I'm very a go-getter, but like when I'm at home, I don't want to do
Mhm.
dishes. I don't want to do these things.
The dishes,
I leave the
right?
cleaning,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm just gonna work. So I focus a lot on my work, and then I'm drained, and I didn't really think I was doing depressed when I'm a workaholic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turn on a movie and watch it while you're doing the things you don't want to do. That's how I do. Yeah, but then when I watch a movie, I fall asleep. And then when I'm like reading a book, I fall asleep. I have to keep in motion, but yeah, it's
Let me ask you this, happy movies or sad movies? Or dark movies?
not dark movies. It's usually romantic comedies, so
Okay.
something to make me happy.
Okay, for me, the darker the better.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, and if it's my son, the movie is sacred. You do not do other things.
That's
while the
Right.
movie is
thing.
on.
You sit with your hands folded.
I relate to your son because my oldest is exactly like your son, and we are always down on him and saying, "Why would you do this? Why don't you take initiative?" When I'm like, "Oh my goodness, he is totally doing." and yeah, and I know how sometimes I relate to him, but now I need to know why I relate to him more.
Good. Sounds like you're finding yourself,
That's great.
your type. All right, well, we have reached the end of our time. Next week
Next week
is
we are
Ash
off,
Wednesday.
yes.
So we'll resume our Enneagram work in 2 weeks. And it'll be with the Enneagram 5, the investigator. See you then.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.